Welcome to the Liverpool of 1897 and the earliest moving images of a city that by then had become one of the busiest and most important trading ports in the world. By the time this film was shot for the Lumiere brothers, the magnificent neoclassical St George's Hall had already been open to the public for 43 years. Queen Victoria was celebrating her Diamond Jubilee, and it was a time of horse-drawn trams, gaslight, milk delivered in churns by cart, and traffic congestion. By 1897, the River Mersey was a busy thoroughfare for ships arriving from and leaving for trading destinations all over the world. The city had become the largest importer of cotton, grain and timber, and the docks were the busiest in the country. To ease congestion along the dock road, a group of businessmen got together to create the world's first electric overhead railway, which quickly became known as the Docker's Umbrella, a useful place to shelter in the rain. It had opened just 4 years before these images were filmed, and for the first time, the elevated rail system allowed the public to see over the dock walls for a view of the hidden world within. Queen Victoria had been the first reigning monarch to use trains, but by the time these scenes were filmed in 1907, Victoria was dead and her son, Edward VII, was king. The city was celebrating its 700th birthday, and it did so in imperial style with a huge procession through Wavertree Park. 1,500 people took part in the pageant, which stretched for a third of a mile. With elaborate costumes and artfully designed floats, the parade told the story of Liverpool from its early settlers, the Neolithic boat people, the monks of Birkenhead Priory, King John's signing of the Charter in 1207, and beyond. Uniquely for its time, the procession involved members of the city's black communities, representing a shameful period in the city's history. From around 1740 until the abolition of the slave trade in 1807, Liverpool was Britain's main slaving port, and it was Liverpool ships that transported more than 1 million Africans across the Atlantic to the Americas. By 1907, Liverpool was home to communities from both Africa and Asia, but there's little archive footage available of their presence in the city. While the procession wound its way around Wavertree Park, in the arena area, 2,000 children took part in an impressive physical drill. The welfare of children at the beginning of the 20th century was starting to become more of a priority. In the years before the National Health Service, few could afford medical care, and the child mortality rate was high. The Liso Open-Air Hospital for Children at Moreton was founded in 1914 by social reformer Margaret Bevan. 14 years later, she was to become Liverpool's first female Lord Mayor. The hospital was funded by benefactors and cared for the many children who suffered from tuberculosis and malnourishment. In the 1940s, the hospital began admitting adults, and it finally closed in 1982, having served the community for more than 65 years. Margaret Bevan was also the pioneer of the Child Welfare Association. Its health centre here on Copper's Hill was filmed in 1916. Due again to the generosity of caring benefactors, mothers could bring their sick children to be treated without cost. The little girl on the left looks as though she'd be happier at the open-air hospital, but in fact it's 1923 and she's preparing to sail on the Cunard line from Liverpool to Canada. Between 1830 and 1930, over 9 million emigrants sailed from Liverpool bound for a new life in Canada, America and Australia. Liverpool was the most popular port of departure for European emigrants due to the well-established transatlantic links made by the importing of timber and cotton. As these pictures show, By 1923, the 5-day crossing, even for third-class passengers, was a relatively comfortable and enjoyable experience. Ocean liners were also a passion of twin brothers Harold and Sidney Preston. Their father Joshua was mayor of Stockport, and during the 1930s they captured many images as they accompanied their father on business trips and to civic events. Their films include footage of the largest British motor ship of her time, Britannic, as she made her maiden voyage from Liverpool to New York on the 28th of June 1930 to the excitement of thousands of well-wishers who turned out to see her off. The Preston brothers also filmed several other key moments in Liverpool's history, including the opening of the Queensway Tunnel. The New World Wonder Tunnel, as it was known, took 9 years and 1,700 men to excavate and build. In July 1934, it was officially opened by George V, and thousands turned out for the unique experience of walking through it, though they were charged sixpence for the privilege. It was a busy couple of days for the King, who also joined dignitaries to mark the opening of the East Lancashire Road in Liverpool. Where the Queensway Tunnel, at the time of building, was the world's longest underwater tunnel, the East Lancs Road was Britain's first purpose-built intercity highway linking Liverpool to Manchester and a forerunner of the modern-day motorway.
A few miles further down the estuary, at the ancient hamlet of Speke, is Liverpool's newly constructed civil airport, the largest and most important commercial aerodrome in the north of England.
This film was shot in 1938 and traced the journey of the River Mersey, highlighting notable landmarks along the way.
Planes on inland air services and planes crossing to Ireland and the Isle of Man call here to refuel, to pick up passengers and to exchange mail. The Mersey has by this time widened out into a broad estuary, and at Eastham on its south bank the Manchester Ship Canal enters it through 3 sets of locks. Here is a 15,000-ton cargo steamer coming down unladen from Manchester and entering the largest of the locks. When she is inside, watertight gates are closed across the channel behind her, and the level of the enclosed lock is either raised or lowered to the level of the river beyond. When this has been done, gates at the other end of the lock are opened and the ship passes out into the river towards Birkenhead and Liverpool. At Birkenhead, comfortably moored in her declining days, lies the ancient warship HMS Conway, now used as a training ship for officers of the merchant service. One of Birkenhead's principal industries is shipbuilding, and the cranes of the famous shipyards are a landmark in the river. On the stocks is the hull of a new Cunarder, the largest liner ever to be built in an English yard. In the fitting out basin is the naval aircraft carrier Ark Royal. impressive of all the buildings in this impressive city is the new cathedral, built high above the river with a tower that will one day be over 300 feet high. In contrast to this is the ventilating tower of the new road tunnel that connects Liverpool with Birkenhead and is a triumph of modern engineering skill. East and west of the pier head is the most amazing system of docks in the world, where over 500 million pounds worth of goods are handled in the year. In little more than 200 years, Liverpool has risen from a humble fishing village into one of the greatest seaports in the world.
By the time these scenes were filmed, the docks had already been feeling the effects of the Depression for several years. Unemployment in the city was over 18%, double the national average. And Liverpool would soon become a target for the Luftwaffe, suffering wave after wave of bombing raids during the Blitz. And even once the war was over, the austerity continued. As well as rationing well into the 1950s, there was also, due to the war damage, a huge shortage of steel. Without it, reconstructing Liverpool was impossible, and so yet another scrap metal drive was launched. In the city, redundant tram lines were ripped out after the tram services had been replaced by buses. Anderson shelters were dismantled, metal-sprung beds were thrown out, and the debris of war was recycled. By 1957, there was a new air of optimism, and the city prepared for its 750th birthday celebrations. A huge clear-up operation was launched for the visit of the Queen Mother and dignitaries from across the Commonwealth. But there was no historical pageant, souvenir medals or mugs. Instead, 145,000 children were given a book about the story of Liverpool. One building that remarkably escaped the German bombs was the city's Anglican Cathedral, still under construction in 1957. The foundation stone had been laid by King Edward VII in 1904, and building continued throughout the two world wars. Many stonemasons began and ended their working life here and wouldn't live to see it opened by Queen Elizabeth II 74 years later in 1978. 1957 was also a notable year for two other reasons. The dilapidated overhead railway was demolished, as no one was prepared to foot the huge cost of repairing it, and the city waved goodbye to its last tram. It was out with the old and in with the new. The building of a Catholic cathedral in Liverpool had first been discussed in 1847, and one was started but never finished. It was 1962 before plans and costs were finally approved and work began. 5 years later, on the 14th of May 1967, Northwest Film Productions filmed the consecration of the completed cathedral. And as the celebrations continued, elsewhere in the city work was underway on what was to become another Liverpool icon, St John's Beacon. To some, the beacon was an architectural eyesore, but to others, it was a symbol of Liverpool's stature, a city that rose above others, a city steeped in the history of the past, but always looking boldly to the future. We leave you now with some more enduring images of Liverpool over the last 100 years.